Our industry is moving faster than ever. Where are freight volumes headed? How will this affect capacity? And of course, what's the newest technology that can benefit your business? Those questions and many more will be answered at the industry's hottest freight tech conference this November in Chicago. Come join us at FreightWaves Live November 12th and 13th at the McCormick Center. Visit FreightWavesLive.com to register.
Welcome to your Tuesday edition of FreightWaves Now. A really exciting brokerage update from Donny Gilbert. But first off, here's Nick Austin with your weather update.
Welcome to FreightWaves Weather, your Tuesday edition. I'm FreightWaves meteorologist Nick Austin. Not a lot of major weather today, but there will be some nuisance weather, that's for sure. Some parts of the country will be wet, while other parts of the country will see snowfall. The main areas of snowfall today, where it could come down heavy at least at times, is across parts of the high plains over in the Midwest. But first we'll talk about the rainy parts of the country. That's going to be across the southeastern U.S. from Florida all the way up into around the Outer Banks of North Carolina and some parts of Texas, Oklahoma, out to the desert southwest. But the good news is no severe thunderstorms expected, just kind of run-of-the-mill garden variety thunderstorms, and I doubt we'll see many areas of flash flooding. So it's just kind of be general thunderstorms and just wet weather on parts of I-10, I-20, and I-40 across those parts of the country. Now we'll start talking about the snowfall, which might be a little bit more of a hassle for some of the drivers out there today. And it could be coming down hard, at least at times, across parts of Montana, across the Dakotas, right into the upper Midwest, especially later today and tonight across the Midwest. So these areas that are shaded in this kind of blue-green color here in the Midwest, up in Minnesota, those are winter weather advisories from the National Weather Service. Some parts of these states will see maybe up to about 4 inches of snow, which doesn't sound like a lot. It's not going to be a major storm, but some parts of I-90, I-94, I-29, some other secondary routes in between, there could be some blowing snow at times. The snowfall rates themselves, the intensity of the snow at times could be pretty heavy and limit visibility for drivers out there. But some of the higher elevations near Great Falls and some other parts of Montana might see up to about 6 or 8 inches of snow. So I'd say a moderate to kind of low-level snowstorm, but still going to cause some problems. Shippers should expect some delays from any freight that has to move through those parts of the country. Last, we're going to talk about parts of Northeast and New England. Just to get you a little bit ready for later in the week, by Thursday and Friday, some interior parts of the Northeast and New England could see a pretty hefty snowstorm. We could see several inches to maybe a foot of snow in some of the high elevations of interior New England and up into eastern Canada, as well as possibly some high winds in spots as well. So there might be some blowing and drifting snow. So this could be at least one of the first major snowstorms for parts of the Northeast and New England. Luckily, it's not going to affect a lot of major metropolitan or major freight markets along the I-95 corridor, but you have to be careful across interior sections, and that includes upstate New York, Syracuse, and Rochester, and over to Buffalo. That's what you need to know for your weather today. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get our weather and all of our other videos. Have a great day and be careful out there.
Welcome to your Tuesday edition of the Carrier Update, sponsored by Power Fleet. My name is Kyle Cunningham. Thanks again for joining me. Sad news today from the outbound tender volume index to the USA. Blue Mountain here. Let's take a look and see what's going on. As we made our way through the month of October, it's looking pretty positive, especially in comparison to where volumes were last year. But as we come over to the end of October and the beginning of November to where we're at today, big move down in conjunction with last year's moving back up. So kind of a dangerous situation to be in as it turns down. What's going to happen? This is why it's important that you watch the Carrier Update every single day to get your updates on what's happening in regards to outbound volumes in the U.S. Let's take a look at outbound tender rejects across the U.S. This tree map here, we're looking at the weekly change from this point last week of all the markets that are 10% and above. So 10% and above implies that carriers have control in this market. Big moves in Saginaw, you can see after the strike, 17% up, huge moves. Arkansas staying strong as well. Middle of the country holding strong all the way down to the bottom. St. Cloud, Minnesota, 10.23. So these are the markets you want to take a look at. Big moves up, big moves down. Make sure you get what you deserve in these. Reefer, outbound, tender, rejects, and Tifton, Georgia, huge moves up from the end of October to where we're at now. 42% of these contracted tenders being rejected. So if you're not getting enough money out in Tifton for your reefer freight in that market, make sure you slap a little more on what you're asking for. Now let's take a look and see what's going on out west in Phoenix, Arizona. As we move over, we can see the long haul outbound rejects. Long hauls, good runs out of Phoenix, pretty flat for the majority of the month. As of yesterday, big moves up 173%. So if you're in Phoenix, if you have assets in Phoenix and you want to run long haul, understand that there is a capacity crunch in this market in essence, but at the same time, the inbound is way higher than the outbound volume. Both of them trending down though. So with the inbound trending down, that's less capacity come in the market to then take that freight down the road. So moves up in outbound rejections, you got to pay attention to it. And that's why you've got to watch your carrier update every single day. We'll see you again tomorrow. Now I'm joined by our market expert, Donny Gilbert, talking about what's going on in regards to national volumes and a little bit up northeast. Donny, what's happening?
Thank you, Kyle. You've already talked about the volumes a little bit on the national outbound tender volume index. It seems like every time we get a good steam rolling ahead, something always happens and they drop back down. Here, when we talked last week, they'd gotten just above 10,000, I believe, on Wednesday. Very exciting, but over the weekend they dropped back down to 97.55. This is not what we want to see, especially rolling into November. But here we look at an outbound map that I brought up to show you the actual change. So as we look at this, we see a lot of red, Kyle. These are markets on the West Coast. This is what kind of brings me a lot of concern. These are areas where a lot of the freight normally ships out of throughout the holiday season, and now we got volumes dipping down. So we've kind of compared last year to the 2018 season. They're very close. We believe they're going to pretty well stay the same as what we saw last year, just had a lot lower, you know, kind of a more of a muted on the rates instead of actually the actual volumes. But our volumes are still a little bit higher than we expect for them to turn back up. So if we dive in and look at our outbound tender rejection rate index, we see last year how these correlate very, very closely. We see the peak here, you know, back in July. We see the small little peak here that we had in September. All this is lining up except for, you know, this correlates with the rates, the spot market rates. Now they're a lot further lower than they were last year. So we still believe these are going to correlate and start picking up here as these pick up. And we're still going to have a peak for fourth quarter, a couple, a peak right before Thanksgiving and a peak right before Christmas. But the sad part is our rates are just going to be a lot lower. And it's still because of this capacity issue. We have a lot more capacity and the shippers are in control of the rates. We have Seth Holmes that reports weekly on the pricing power index.
The DHL supply chain pricing power index.
The DHL supply chain pricing. And we saw last week how the needle was over very far to the left, which means the shippers are in much control of the pricing power right now in 2019. And that's where we see the difference here. And every time we start to peak up a little bit, like the end of the month, it's dropping back down rapidly. And that shows how much the shippers are controlling the rates right now. So until all this capacity gets out of the market, we're going to have this issue. Looking at my favorite market of the week here, we're going to go up to the northeast here and look at Rochester, New York.
Big moves, man.
Well, I got excited because, you know, we actually have a market in the northeast that's jumping up over 10%.
Yeah.
Now the overall drive-in capacity is a little bit over 7%. But as we look at this, we saw volumes pick up here over the past few days, and the Midhaul outbound tender rejection rate picked up to over 10%. So that's loads that are running between 251 miles and 450 miles. Now some of those loads going from Rochester are probably still going up to like the Boston area, and that's a lot of the driving for these rates jumping up. But still, to find markets in the northeast, in New York, with tender rejection rates over 10%, that's kind of what I want to see right now. I want to see volatility start picking up in these markets, and as we've seen everything's starting to kind of slow down some, this is a good market to watch if you're a carrier in the northeast or a broker in the northeast. Find some of these loads out of the shorter runs and book them. Of course, you need to elevate your rates because you're going to pay a high price to a carrier. You need to bid them a lot higher, and when the volatility's a lot higher, you can make a lot better margins on loads out of this market and the shorter hauls.
And that's why it's so important to follow these updates every single day, because now you know exactly what's going on in regards to Midhaul freight in Rochester. And if you're looking in Rochester today, please leave us a comment and tell us what's going on in the market. Thanks so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit like and subscribe. And if you're following us on all our social media channels, make sure it's on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter, and we'll see you again tomorrow.